Good morning. This is Dr. Matthew Dunn, host of The Future of Email. My guest today, Chris Arrendale of CyberDataPros, Inbox Monster, and more than a couple other hats as we were just discussing, right? Welcome,
Oh,
Chris.
yeah. Thank you so much for having me. I'm looking forward to this.
Introduce yourself to the world, man.
So Chris Arrendale, I've been involved in email technology, privacy, security for, oh gosh, over 22 years.
Yeah.
Started my first business I would say right at 2001. I was working with lawyers on their IT, their software, and started actually sending out emails for a lot of lawyers. They wanted to
Kidding.
they wanted to do, of course they had the TV commercials, they had the billboards, but they started to finally realize that email was relevant, inexpensive, and actually, had a really good ROI, right? And
Yeah.
so I started to do that. Eventually started working, sold that business, started working for Silverpop at the time, an email service provider, which is now Acoustic.
Which was
Uh,
Silverpop was acquired by IBM and then spun back out,
yeah,
right?
it's come back out. Yeah. So
Wow.
met my wife there. We worked together there, which was great. Um, I've worked for a lot of email agencies, worked for a lot of ESP startups.
Yeah.
I've started a few more companies. I sold a email deliverability business in 2018.
Uh-huh.
And then of course in 2021 started CyberDataPros, where we work with, businesses of all shapes and sizes on data privacy, compliance, cybersecurity, and really kind of protecting the data that they have, right? Because if you can imagine, email marketers, agencies, email service providers, they collect a lot of data and store a lot of data.
Mhm.
Is it safely protected? Who has access to it? All these things that we kind of review, and so we do a lot of internal audits, risk assessments. We help clients and companies get prepared for things like ISO, SOC, HIPAA, PCI, and so it's busy, but we're having a lot of fun doing it.
What's the top couple of years, let's call them mistakes that you expect to find when you walk in and work with a new email marketing client?
I'd say a few things that really kind of come up are data over collection, right? So again, if you think about progressive profiling, if you think about the forms that are on these websites,
Yeah.
they're collecting a lot of data that really it's not relevant for what they're doing, right? Do they need job title? Do they need, company revenue? Do they need, all the different particular areas of PII, things like address and phone number, right? Once you have that data, it's sitting there, maybe let's say in Marketo or in, a platform, Salesforce,
Yeah.
then other people have access to it. They can download it. Let's
Mhm.
say your login were to get hacked. Now people
Right.
can, use that information maliciously. So we do see a lot of that, right? Data over collection. Um, we also tend to see that the data that is stored, it's saved on somebody's laptop, right? It's not encrypted,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And we see that quite a bit.
Yeah.
And you think about it from like a disaster recovery perspective, right? So if that laptop were to crash, all your
Right.
data is gone. But
Right.
if the laptop were to get lost or stolen, somebody has access to that. So a lot of times it's about data over collection, data minimization, principle of least privilege, privacy by design, a lot of those sort of terms that we use a lot because, doing these audits, we find just a lot of those gaps, right? You can take a look at infrastructure. You can take a look at, things like IPs, domains, DNS records, right? DMARC, right? Or they have DMARC set up. But honestly, it's getting back to the basics. It's understanding what data is being collected, how it's stored, who has access to it, and really how you're securing it. We find that a lot, and honestly, most of the time it comes down to training. A lot of individuals just they weren't aware. They just assume that, hey, if I put it in this location, then, IT or somebody has already configured it to where it's properly set up.
Right.
And
They
we
they will have taken care of it. I'm sure training's a piece of it. How often do you find that orgs are actually properly budgeted and resourced for the level of execution they should do with the data they're collecting?
Yeah, it's very minimal. We were
Yeah.
working with a client recently that I was really impressed with. Again, they had budget, they had the resources to actually to really kind of, I would say, be about 60, 70% there,
Mhm.
which is great, right? When we work with clients, we're talking 10, 20%, right? The things like they don't even have policy documentation, they don't have training, they don't have acceptable use policies,
Right.
data classification policies. There's a lot of that that's missing. But oftentimes you'll find that one in a million that may have a little bit more set up and are ready to kind of move forward.
Which means most likely there's someone with some experience at one of the other kinds of orgs who's now running the things there and says, no, we cannot do this on a shoestring. The risk is too great. It won't actually work, et cetera, et cetera.
Absolutely.
I'm curious about your reaction to something. I want to flip data to a different perspective for a second. I worked on a post recently for one of the email orgs I belong to. And I was trying to think through this puzzle of personalization, and in particular, the tension between personalization and privacy. You got the guy in the street, if you ask him, says, "Oh, I want to be treated personally." And then when you say, "Will you fill in one more field on the form?" He goes, No, I'm too busy for that.
Yep. And
Reaction?
it's interesting. I did a webinar recently, a few weeks ago, called Privacy versus Personalization.
Yeah.
Primarily because, again, as marketers, what they want to collect data, personalize, give individuals, again, a good sort of experience based upon the data that they've collected, right?
Yeah.
Because again, as a data subject, right? When I give my information, when I give my data up, what am I getting in return?
Right.
Am I getting some sort of value, right? Whether that be a webinar, maybe it be a PDF download, maybe it be a giveaway, something. What am I getting in return?
Right.
And so you got to think about, if they get third-party cookies going away, you got to start thinking about first-party data. You got to start thinking about, browsers with a do not track piece coming up, right? Especially Google Chrome coming out next year.
Right.
So all that it really means like, hey, we want personalization. It's also scary when you get that email from Amazon that's like, dear so-and-so, I see your address is this. Thank you for the subscribe and save. We're going to be sending you some toilet paper because, as of our algorithm means that, hey, it takes you 2 weeks to go through 8 rolls. Therefore, it's a full personalized experience. It's like, whoa, that may be too much, right? But at the same time, it's what you're getting in return.
It's what you're getting in return. But you open an interesting door there. My Amazon login is well over a quarter century old. There, I said it.
Mm-hmm.
I happen to live in Seattle when Amazon first sort of showed up in the world. Yeah, but Amazon in email, at least in their email, in quite a light touch on personalization, less than they used to do. Right.
Yep.
And
Right.
I find it intriguing that the company that I am sure has the most data about me, just because of the frankly purchases and history, they don't use it as much as
They used to.
they used to, and as a personalization enthusiast might say they should. Now, maybe that's because they got me anyway, and I'm not going away. Maybe, I don't know. I know with with package notifications, hey, you bought. They don't even list what it is anymore.
Right. Right.
Intriguing, right?
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
you'd think the personalization you want is, well, I want to know what thing is in, that is being referenced here. They don't even tell you what's in the package. And like, it also puts them in a locus of control. This just occurred to me. I got to go back to Amazon and find out what's actually coming to the door.
They're getting that traffic, right? They're getting that traffic back to their site, to their
Yeah.
app, right? That's key. I think the biggest thing, thinking about the consumers, especially in the United States, right? The reason why CCPA really started was due to data breaches, right? Or data being sold or data being shared to third parties. If you look at these state laws, none of them go into that explicit opt-in consent for email, right? It's more about, privacy by design, data protection, security, storage, all that. And so, sure, privacy is really concerned about what you're doing with the data, how you're processing it, how you're storing it, et cetera. But I think the biggest thing on that is that consumers still want that personalized experience, right? Dear first name, last name, they want that experience, but to what level? Because you're right. Once you hit certain, notes with certain people, they stop.
Right. The creepy threshold.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Because why are you asking me about company revenue? Why are you asking me my salary range? Why are you asking me my age, religion? What are you going to do with that data? Right. And how are you going to market to me? Because that information is not relevant to what your company is doing.
Well, and then there's the category of data that, I mean, you'll know better than I do, but there's the category of data that comes with the interaction on a website or an app that could be captured, could be useful, isn't in the consumer's mind necessarily as something that they're exposing. I mean, the obvious example is location to a reasonable degree, right? Someone goes and fills in a web form, you probably know where they are.
Yeah,
Pretty close, right? So,
100%.
and did you ask me about recording that? Is it actually of value for me, of value to me for you to keep track of that? All of these are open questions. And then
Right.
there's the end run of this, which is, oh my word, like the form is going to be so long and the permission agreement is going to be so arcane that everyone's going to go, I just don't want to deal with
Just don't
this.
want to do it.
Right?
Yep.
I just close the window, and it feels to me like we're living, yeah, we're living as we're sort of starting to arc over. It was a Wild West, grab anything you want for quite a stretch. And now we're starting to say, as a culture broadly,
Right.
hang on a minute. Maybe we need some guidelines and rails and rules and things like that.
Right. Because I mean, you think about, just again, site that scrape your cookies, site that scrapes like your location data,
Yeah.
right? What's the relevancy there? Why do you need it? But yeah, I mean, if you notice now, it's accept all cookies, deny all cookies, allow functional cookies. What about these cookies? Right? All of that's now kind of permeating like through our society. And you got to think about just the existence of things like GDPR and Castle that have been happening in other countries.
Yeah.
United States is finally getting around to it, but again, it's about the data protection. Don't sell, don't share my data. Without the explicit opt-in consent, right? We all know that can spam is still the law of the land in the United States, whereas things like GDPR and Castle have used that explicit opt-in.
Yep.
To again, I think depending upon how you look at it, right, from a privacy professional, the explicit opt-in is great because I'm physically having to do something in order for you to communicate with me.
Mm-hmm.
But the marketing side is like that limits the number of interactions and how we can work with people.
Yeah. Do we need national law of the land to address these issues? Is can spam due for replacement?
I think can spam's due for a review. Absolutely. It's been too long. I think there are a lot of things that have changed. Technology has changed. The privacy culture of the world has changed. I think there needs to be some review and things like how you can communicate with people. Right. I mean, unsubscribe is great. Header matching the email, subject line match the body, all that's great. But the consent side may need a little bit of work. Right. But I think on the flip side, with a national privacy law, ADPPA, which is currently sitting in the House, something that kind of intersects all these states that are doing their own thing, having something more on a national level that's like, we care about privacy, we care about your information, we care about how it's being used. We need to kind of do this on a national level versus just all these states doing things.
Quick sidebar, Chris. I'm not sure if this is the cause, but there's a scratch in the audio on your side. And I think it may be the mic.
Yeah, I'll hold it down.
Rubbing a little bit. It's like, I want to try what he's saying in here.
Sorry about
trying
that.
to see if it correlated with your motion and all. We're fine. I will actually run the audio through an AI processor. We'll see if it catches that.
ChatGPT.
Yeah. Due for an update. And the other thing, just the pervasiveness of digital and data in our lives is so different now from when can spam was passed. It's like now you carry your life on a supercomputer in your pocket everywhere you go. That's a big deal, and that's a lot of data, and so on.
Yeah, nobody's reading the terms of use, the privacy policies. It's just accept and move on. Let me install whatever app, allow it to do whatever it's going to do. And I think it's all about that customer experience, right? Because if you think about it, let's take Uber, for instance. Uber, again, you got your credit card saved, your home address saved, your work address saved, location data enabled, all of that stuff.
Yeah.
What would the experience be like if you didn't save all that?
Right. And I mean, granted, they're in the job of moving my carcass from point A to point B when I want them to.
Sure.
So it's useful to the thing of value they do, the job to be done that I hire them for. And yeah, I wouldn't want to let gone. Would I want someone outside Uber to get access to that? Probably not. Right? Probably not. Google has a really good idea. I spend way too much time in this one place. Right.
Yeah, exactly. And the interesting thing is the other day I was eating at a restaurant and left, and it was like I had a little pop up with my phone that said, your reviews are, there's a lot of people that like your reviews. Would you like to leave a review for
Yeah.
insert the restaurant that I was at? And it's like, whoa, that's interesting. It's like,
Really?
how did that get turned on? How did that get enabled? Right. So
Wow. Wow.
yeah,
That's that's more forward than I would have expected. I mean, just getting asked for a review, the someone somewhere knows you left the restaurant is one thing, but to connect that with with your influencer rating, so to speak,
sure.
out in the world.
It was interesting. Believe me, I was like, oh, that's a little too far. So
Yeah,
oh,
it feels a little too far. And
right.
and isn't it funny that part of the threshold that concerns us is emotional and not necessarily easy to articulate crisply or put into policy language, right? Feels
Sure.
X is a big deal and should be a big deal.
But what's that limit for everyone, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
what's too far? Because if you ask somebody again, like company revenue or location data,
Yeah.
religion,
Yeah.
everybody has a different, like it hits different. And so
Yes.
understanding your audience and knowing again with progressive profiling, with the web forms, everything else,
Mhm.
understanding where that limit is for your audience is key for marketers.
Yeah, it is. It is. I think marketers are wearing wearing a fairly horrendous set of handcuffs in some ways
They
in
are.
in trying to do the job of know the customer and know the market, within the constraints of law, within the constraints of how much time we'll give them, how many forms we'll fill in, within the constraints of is their data house in perfect order, because nobody's is.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
You're like, oh, and then about the time that you've got a halfway decent picture of me, I'm gonna unsubscribe and blow that record up for you.
Or write in and say, delete all the data you have about me, or what information do you have? And then,
Yeah.
and I think the marketers are really being constrained with having to be CCPA experts, having to be GDPR experts, having to
True.
be
That's true.
DMARC experts,
Yeah,
right?
that's true.
All these things that they're BIMI, right? Like they're being experts in all these items and areas. And it's like, they have a job to do as well. They need to, again, be
Yeah.
they're just being piled on with all these other responsibilities. And so that's where we find a lot of times, like, we'll come in and help ease that burden by being that expert
Yeah.
and helping to kind of guide the process along. But we do see that a lot with marketers.
Well, marketers now, you've seen that MarTech landscape diagram, right? With all the
Hmm.
MarTech systems on it. Like
Oh yeah.
the MasterCard in the CMO's pocket is the gateway to a shadow IT organization of gargantuan proportions.
Oh yeah.
And it's not like all of that stuff comes pre-assembled. All the stuff off that
No,
MarTech landscape doesn't come pre-assembled.
no.
And I find a lot of marketing orgs, and I'm gonna bet you can shake your head. Yeah, they're very undergone in terms of the technical knowledge and talent they should have on the team.
100%. Yeah. And
Yeah,
I think they're sold a lot of, hey, this technology is easy. It's point and click. It's,
yeah,
you click a few buttons, API integration, data just flows. And it's like, that's not the case.
yeah, yeah. And you start multiplying, and you get geometric confusion of all of those easy to connect.
And we'll go into clients and they'll have 2, 3, 4 email service providers. And you start to
Right,
wonder, like, why is that?
right.
Well, this person left, this person came in, and they prefer this platform over the other one, but we still keep that one. And it's like, well, there needs to be some consolidation. You got to understand and figure out why you have each technology, each platform, do the job that you need to do.
Well, sometimes it's because they literally don't know how to turn it off, right?
Right.
It's doing job X, and whoever set it up is gone,
Right.
and we need to move that thing it does into this other box, but we actually don't know how it works. So we'll leave it like, hey, kids, learn COBOL. I guarantee you'll get employed.
Exactly. But we see that all the time that, it's like this system is still going.
Yeah.
And, we work with clients on DMARC as well. So again, when you turn DMARC on, you
Yeah.
start to see the sources that are using your domain to send email.
Right.
And you're like, who's using this product and this
Yeah.
product and this product? And
Yeah.
we worked with clients where we actually had to go to procurement and billing and
To
say,
find
who's
it out.
signing off on these? Exactly. So you can start to work your way to shut that down.
Well, it's like going through your own credit card statement to find out, what am I subscribed to again? 'Cause
Right.
I
Netflix and
forgot.
Hulu and all these things. You're like the bill keeps getting larger and you're like,
Yes,
I'm
it
not using
does.
that. So yes, that's exactly what DMARC does.
I hate annual renewals. There, I said it out loud. Like, what? What? You expected me to remember that? No.
Oh yeah. Automatic renewals. That gets you every time.
Yeah, it makes and also sort of makes the world or the economy go round in some sectors as
We're
well.
helping out.
Now let's go on a tangent for a second. My word, we're piling up a lot of data in the world.
We are.
It's a mess too.
Well,
And I keep thinking, I mean, use your own your own hard drive or inbox as the stand-in for the world's problems. Like, I should go clean up that other inbox, but I haven't gotten to it yet this year or the year before, the year before that. It's like I opened an inbox the other day and I forget how many tens of thousands of messages were in there. Right. And
oh yeah.
blame Google if you want for making the storage look like it's free. But, aside from select all delete, which I wasn't quite willing to do, it's like, I just don't have the energy or interest in grappling with the thing. And then with what looks like the nominal cost is so low, the closing the tab is an easier solution.
Right. Yeah. And a lot of people will actually just close the account too, right? They're like, okay,
Sure.
I'm just going to close the account as opposed to going through and trimming, and they'll just create another one. That's one way to
Right.
do
That's
it. And,
true. Yeah.
but
That's true.
but you're right. It's like I find, especially during certain parts of the year where unsubscribes tick up, right? Because people are
Mm.
like they're spending a little extra time maybe during the holidays or maybe during the summer, and they're actually going through and unsubscribing from brands or unsubscribing from certain companies. And it's interesting to see those trends because you'll see things like complaint rate spike up and block list spike up during the holidays as well, right? Because
Really.
this why is this company trying to sell me something when I haven't heard from them in 5 years, in 10 years?
Yeah.
And then it's like, that's abusive behavior, right?
Right.
So that's, you think about that during the holiday times, but, you're right. When it comes to the data that we have, the data that we're collecting, it is piling up, and it's piling up in a way that makes a lot of professionals uncomfortable, a lot of marketers uncomfortable, but it's also about like, what are you doing with that data? And where is it being stored and who is accessing it? So it kind of comes back to the fundamentals of over collection of data forms, things of that nature. So think from that perspective, you got to also look at things like Google Drive, right? Or Microsoft OneDrive.
Mm.
And when you are collecting that data, which folder are you putting it in?
Mhm.
By the way, you shared this with a client that is no longer a client, right? Or you shared the top level folder. Now they have access to all those subfolders.
Right. Right.
So it's having that button down and training for employees to understand what they can and can't do as it relates to that data.
Mm.
See that all the time, and including things like implementing DLP rules, right? So data loss prevention. So if somebody were to receive an email that had PII in it,
Mhm.
that attachment would be stripped out.
Mhm.
Prepending words in the subject line that's like risk or PII risk or security risk or something. That way it's in front of the person that's actually opening the mail, right? So it's I still see clients all the time. They'll email spreadsheets of PII back and forth.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like, sure, Gmail has, great encryption and I'm sure everybody's password is very secure, right? Where nobody's going to be able to go out there and get hacked. But, there are a lot of fundamentals that just aren't being done.
You know, the worst at trusting email as if it were secure, in my experience, the worst at that are lawyers.
They are.
They're
Yes.
funny. Like, oh no, don't put it in the cloud. I'm really security conscious. Email it to me. Do you know what you just said, buddy?
Yep. And then think about it, right? Like, how often do you go back and you say, I'm going to delete that file from my inbox?
Mm.
Never happens. It just stays there.
It just stays there. Yeah.
It just stays there,
Yeah.
and then again, who else has access to that mailbox?
Yeah. You want to scare yourself hop in your search engine of choice and put in your name and then something like file type,
Yeah, PDF or Excel.
XLS or XLW. You'd be surprised how many places
A
you
lot.
turn up, how many lists you're in. Yeah, it's
We, we
nuts.
we do a lot of that for clients, dark web scanning. We do a
Sure.
lot of those Google searches and show this. There are multiple reasons why you should not be doing this, and here are the reasons why. And once they see that, it's then like, okay, we have to get serious about this.
Yeah. Yeah. And serious in part because of the risk, that's what one of the things you're helping them address.
Sure.
Is there an efficiency in addition to risk reduction? Is there an efficiency outcome? Like it actually costs less to do this well than to do it poorly?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Because you got to think about, not only buying too much software or, again, thinking about training from a, overall security perspective, but I think it's about, there are efficiencies and, hey, we can automate the offboarding process. We can automate the onboarding process. We can
Right.
automate, categorize data by groups. So that way, if somebody comes on, they get added to a group.
Mhm.
They now have access to everything as opposed to piecemealing stuff.
Right.
There's a lot of systems out there that again are single sign-on, right?
Mhm.
Single sign-on is great because if the person leaves, you turn off their account, which also disables their single sign-on capabilities right across the board. So
Yeah.
there are a lot of efficiencies that can be gained. Um, and we do work with clients on those because I like to show, hey, it's not only protecting the data that you have and your employees from data breaches and all that, it's about actually saving money and actually introducing efficiencies. And
Yeah.
they're
Yeah.
like, wow, really? Because when I hear data privacy and cybersecurity and
Yeah.
all and deliverability,
Yeah.
that's a cost center, right? Where
Yeah.
most people think it's a cost center.
Yeah.
It's like
Yeah.
not. There are a lot of ways that you can actually save money that way.
Well, and lever yourself to make more of what you're spending. And I'm thinking specifically there of deliverability, right? The company that doesn't doesn't invest a little bit in getting deliverability right, a little bit or a lot, could be sending email into the black hole that does nothing for them.
I've seen not only that. It's so funny because you'll work with somebody like I'm good. I'm not getting any spam complaints. Well, that's because all your emails go into the junk folder, right? You can't hit the spam button if you're in the junk folder.
Right.
But I also would say that you know I still see marketers that don't look at their campaign metrics. They may say, "Hey, our deliverability is 99%." That's not deliverability. That's your delivered rate, right? Sent minus bounced equals delivered. So you're delivering 99%. But they don't dig into the details. They may just look at the open rate. They may just look at the click rate, but they're not looking at bounces. They're not looking at unsubscribes. They're not looking at complaints. All of that is very helpful, right? Because in a bounce message, you may see that you're blocked at Proofpoint. You may see that there's a issue at Microsoft. Dig into those bounces. That's where the gold is, right? You can use seed testing. You can use all these different tools. Combine that with the goal that you have in those metrics, that really paints the picture of what's happening with your email.
Except that nobody's looking at open rates since Apple decided to
That's
most
true.
knows, right?
That's true. Yeah. And now marketers are saying, what should I be looking at? Right. And some, you'll hear answers from experts that'll say, hey, look at Google Analytics, right? Because then you can track your UTM codes, see what the traffic looks like. And then, you hear all these things. And some people are like, well, now I'm looking at click rates or now I'm looking at this. And it's, it's across the board.
Yeah, it's a mess is what it is. I had to make a face when you mentioned Google Analytics because leave how you contextualize Google aside for a second. It drives me nuts that email marketers tend to live inside of their ESP and not actually in that larger bucket that most
Sure.
everyone else is using. Like, why are we not passing this through to one analytics platform? So we're all talking when we're arguing about attribution, we're all actually talking about the same like records in the same pie that we're trying to slice up and so on. Like, and
Yeah.
I mean, every field's guilty of myopia, right? Every field's guilty.
Sure.
This is what matters because this is what I work with. And I don't
Yeah.
understand what you work with, and it's too much.
It's where my KPIs are, right? My KPIs and
My
goals
KPIs
are
are
here.
here. Yeah, yeah,
Right?
yeah.
So you get that, but I think it's, just looking more at bounce logs, looking at the different records and the data that you have. Will help you because, we go in and we'll see maybe a 20% bounce rate. And then you're like, well, what happened? Well, I
Yeah.
don't know.
Yeah. Yeah. I don't
What do you
know.
mean? I don't know. Like, so
Well, in some ways, I think that that set of problems, um, we do a lot of selling people into that problem without telling them
sure.
it's going to show up, right? Company that starts small, gets their MailChimp account, realizes this is, key, and then starts getting bigger and doesn't realize that you've gotta act an instrument differently at a certain scale. Well, of course, they didn't know that that was gonna happen when they were starting with a little MailChimp account, right?
Yep.
Like, and then all of a sudden, wow, this is a mess, and we're blacklisted, and none of it's working, and, why didn't somebody tell us this?" Yeah, I don't know.
And scale, right? Because then
And
you start to
scale.
think about like, okay, well, now we have enough traffic for a dedicated IP,
Yeah,
or
yeah,
maybe we were on a shared IP before,
yeah,
or,
yeah, yeah.
custom domains and branded tracking and landing
Right,
pages
right,
and all
right.
those things that happen. And, it's, I get it, small business and you grow and you kind of graduate to like different levels of providers. But, I think there's a lot of things that marketers need to think about from a growing perspective that oftentimes, again, you're kind of blinded into what you're currently doing.
Yeah, yeah, that's true, that's true. And blinded and handcuffed earlier conversation about
Sure.
technical talent, data complexity, time, stress, budget, like all of those factors. And you can't just outsource it, right? You can't
No.
say, "Hey, someone else deal with this problem 100% for me," because I don't think that's actually fully possible.
No, we were working with a client that, a marketer that was asked to do a data mapping exercise, right? And so our
Yeah.
marketer client was like, "I have no idea what to do and how to do that." Right? And so it's having the right people doing the job that needs to get done, right? And then being in a partnership, because oftentimes, you hear like marketers say, "Well, I don't work well with the IT department, and I don't work well with legal, and I don't work well with sales," and it's having a voice at the table, but getting
Yes.
everybody to the table
Yeah,
is
yeah,
important.
yeah. Yeah, that, I wore the hat of IT guy at one point and realizing now that I do other things, realizing the degree which everyone doesn't like you if you're the IT guy is a little humbling.
Trying to lock you down and trying to and just saying no and, you know
I understand why that's the job. I mean, I
Sure.
really do understand why that's the job, and that's sort of gotta be the culture and the mindset because, all the stuff that we're using to live life and do business now was designed to be monkeyed with and open and, malleable and changeable.
Sure.
Like, yeah, the world's not just full of Boy Scouts, is it? No.
No.
Yeah, yeah, it's daunting, you want a secure computer? Unplug it, stick it in the closet.
100%. Right?
That's
Yeah,
about it.
that's about it.
Yeah.
Yeah. Turn your phone off,
Turn your phone yeah, really, right?
especially in
I
today's
mean,
time.
talk to me about mobile for a second, because that's gotta be a the world of mobile has to be both a big source of, activity for you and, a difficult one, I would think.
It can be absolutely, especially when you're dealing with apps, right? The apps that track, the
Yeah,
apps that collect data. We were talking earlier about cookies. There's been a lot of talk about essentially HIPAA as it relates to when you log into a site and you're providing data. That information is being scraped by third party cookies, right? Your symptoms. Let's say you've got a cold or sneezing, things like that. So that's really important, even for apps. You think like Teledoc or you think like a
yeah,
CVS and things of that nature. When
yeah,
you're providing all that data back, what's happening with that data? Who has access to it?
yeah,
Who are they selling it to? Right? Because it would be really easy for some of those companies to say, "Hey, we have all this data on people that live in this geographic area
right,
that maybe they're getting allergies earlier than others." That's a target right there for allergy medication, right?
right,
There's a lot of those conversations happening that, we work with clients on how to protect themselves, and how to design things so that way, again, the data that you're asking for is being used properly, but also you're giving people prompts to say, are you sure? Do you want me to track? Do you want to turn location on? All these things, which I know can be very annoying, but it's also important from a privacy perspective that the consumer understands what's happening with that information.
I will admit to being a longtime kind of Apple-centric guy despite having spent
Sure.
time working at the Borg, Microsoft. But I can step aside from that and say, I think Apple's move with tracking transparency, what, a year and a half ago now,
Hmm.
has been pretty beneficial to people at large.
It
I
has.
I think they choked off a a a fairly appalling ecosystem that had grown up around sort of really everybody could keep track of anything they flip and want to because you're carrying a supercomputer in your pocket, and I'm
Mhm.
glad they stuck those rules in place.
It's actually made a difference. I think a lot of consumers now appreciate that
Yeah,
because,
yeah,
again, you look at Apple, Google, Microsoft, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn. I mean, all these companies have so much data about us
yeah,
and they're selling it and sharing it. But now it feels like from a consumer perspective, it's now back in my hands.
yeah,
Right. And so I
yeah,
think a lot of people are like that.
and to put the default position to I have to say, "Yes, you can do that." I, the consumer, have to say, "Yes, you can do that." Seems like a little move is a big move. It's played absolute havoc on, Facebook's business, I know that for
Oh,
sure.
yeah. And advertising. Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, which okie dokie. Ben Thompson at Stratechery, who I end up quoting about every, third conversation, I think, with guests on the show here. Ben Thompson said, one way to think of Facebook pre-app tracking transparency was it was a bit of a commons. No small or medium business could do the data gathering to understand their customers on their own. So all of them sort of outsourced that into the Facebook pool and then bought back out of that pool in the form of advertising. And tracking transparency kind of blew that up.
Yep.
Like, okay, Ben, I think you're a smart guy, but I also think someone was profiting mightily from that pool.
Oh, 1,000%.
Yeah. So
That's the
I'm
problem.
I'm okay with that going away personally.
Yeah. Well, again, I think the consumers, it's back in their hands. They feel better about providing the information as long as they're getting those prompts, right?
Mm,
And I think it's, again, from an app perspective, when you build an app, it's understanding what data you need to do your job,
yeah.
right? And then building it with that privacy transparency, I think, is really key for app developers.
Yeah, for app developers. Um, where do you see let's talk broadly data and privacy, and we'll narrow in on email. Like what put on your futurist hat for a minute. What are some of the things you expect to happen in the next few years?
I think that hopefully the national ADPPA will come to fruition.
Mhm.
They're struggling right now over the private right of action or the PRA, right? So, if you're in California, you have a private right of action where you can sue directly. Where the other states, of course, you got to go to the state's AG, right? And so there's conversations about that. I think that'll help, tremendously for every resident in the U.S. to know what's happening with their data, how it's being shared or sold, or what rights they have, right? To really kind of clamp down on data breaches. That's still, you turn the news on and every day you hear about this data breach and that data breach. And, then the companies are like, oh, sorry, we'll pay a little fine. And here's 6 months of credit monitoring, right? It's like,
Right, right.
that's not the case. I think that web browsers are going to be smarter about access to
Yeah,
information that's collected for these
yeah,
companies.
yeah,
I still feel that webinars, events, and forms are going to be relevant. Of course, third party cookies going away, first party data, of course, reigning king. Again, continued, as you mentioned, that the supercomputer in your pocket, I think the continued focus is going to be on that. I still think that, Chat GPT is going to change the
I
world
knew
in
we'd go there.
lot of different ways, right? And so, again, the data is what you get out of it is only good enough for what you put into it, right? And so, what information you're asking it. You think about all these, devices that are out there, the home devices, and asking it questions. But there's a lot of concern now, especially in the U.S. after CCPA and after the states are doing what they're doing. about the data that is being given up. And it's interesting to have conversations with people that aren't in the privacy or cybersecurity field, understand now that, wow, the information that I'm providing company X or what I'm putting on Facebook or
Yeah.
what I'm searching in Google, that information is being shared and sold. And I think
Mm.
it's now finally come to light.
Yeah. Yeah. We're realizing what we gave up and saying, I don't know if I want to give quite as much of that up. And to be fair, we've been much more willing to do that in the US, other countries
Sure.
and national domains way ahead of us on a hang on a minute. No.
Right. Right.
Right. Which is, that we want to set those rules for ourselves collectively. That's the nature of a nation, I guess. What, if you were given advice to a prospective client, they're like, gee, maybe I ought to call this guy. What are things they need to start thinking about that might eventually lead them to calling you, but things they could do better on their own too?
I think having policies and procedures in place for understanding, again, data access, data mapping, diagrams. I think that's important, right? What are these systems doing? How's the information being sent back and
Right.
forth? Who has access to it?
Yeah.
We do a lot of training around data privacy and cybersecurity. Do you have a training program? What are you teaching people? Do they understand what a phish is? Do they understand social engineering? All those different tactics. I think it's also important for clients and businesses to do an audit, right? To do an assessment, to identify gaps and risks and what can we do to fix those. Oftentimes, we work with clients that want to do it, but they want an expert to come in. They want that external,
Mhm.
auditor to come in and say, hey, let's look at this from a different lens as opposed to somebody internally doing it with that blind eye that's like, I know about that over there, but I'm not going to talk about it because that's work or that's a risk that I don't want to tackle. So we do a lot of that kind of work. And I'd say that,
Hmm.
reviewing and working with your legal, your compliance, your IT, understand what everybody's doing, get on the same page. I think that's really important. The marketers can't be legal experts and the lawyers can't be marketers. And I say that all the time because, oftentimes it's, the marketers will say, well, I'm in charge of CCPA. I'm in charge of all these rules. And it's like, no, you're not. What you're in charge of is essentially, again, your KPIs, your metrics to get those emails out. And so I think having that conversation and being relevant is important. So lots of areas to dig into. I think a lot of our clients do read a lot of things like IAPP, with International Association of Privacy Professionals.
Yeah.
Of course, they're active in DMA, a lot of different organizations that are important that relate to privacy and cybersecurity for marketers.
It is it's a side comment, and if someone's listening and not watching the video, I'll see if I can give it a sensible connection. As Chris was talking, his camera on its own panned back and out because someone walked in the room and then did a really smooth Hollywood pan back in on Chris. That was AI in
Was.
action, right? As part of this relatively normal conversation we're having, in this case on Zoom. It AI's top of mind now. It's had its Netscape browser moment in the last month or so. Chat GPT, blah, 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 100 million users in a month flat. Cool, interesting. We'll be unpacking that for a long time. But the truth of the matter is, we're already using this stuff.
They
It's
are.
built into your camera.
Yep. It is, and
Wow.
it's interesting because it captures the movement,
Yeah.
and essentially it wants to make sure that the focus is still on, the presenter, but at the same time, what's happening around you.
Right, right. It was trying to do in the cameraman sense, a good job of
Hmm.
capturing this. And it did a good job of capturing the scene. I mean, the person walking out of the door, right as we were saying this,
Right. Yep.
the camera shifts focus for just a second, but then the pan back in on you was really
Smooth.
smooth. It wasn't, if it was programmed in a linear way, that would have been a very jerky thing.
Right.
And it was actually it was a tasteful capture. It's like,
Apple Studio display.
is it really?
It is.
Oh, cool. Oh, cool. I got monitor envy now, man. Are you using a built-in camera or no? That's got to
It's
be,
built in.
that's the built-in camera.
That's built in.
That's impressive. That's
Yeah.
really impressive. Wow. Oh, cool. I mean, that's the thing, as we're at this the Netscape browser moment for AI, because of the I think because of the language and human-centric feel of those chat interactions, like, everybody wants to talk to me about AI, and I mean, everybody, not just professionally, but, friends over for dinner. The topic
Absolutely.
the topic comes up now, but I keep thinking, you know what? We've got pieces of this that have been in place for a long
Well,
time already. I mean, I'm glad we've got a visible moment to focus on it and talk about it and hopefully have some policy control kind of discussions. But the genies plural have already been out of the bottle for quite a stretch now.
it has. Yeah. I
And
think now it's just everybody sees it. It's like, oh, I can type in this box and it'll tell me exactly what to do. It's like
yeah,
that kind of stuff's been around for a while too. So,
yes, yes, yeah. You and I both lived through the internet gone kaboom.
oh yeah,
And this feels like the closest to that kind of explosion that I've seen since. You're like,
100%.
this is gonna change pretty much everything.
It will. It is. It is changing everything.
Yeah.
I talk to people all the time that are like, "Oh, well, I can, maybe not hire the other developer and just use Chat GPT, or maybe I don't need a copywriter, right? I could just use Chat
Yeah.
GPT." Or
Yeah.
so there's a lot of conversations happening
Yeah.
around that, and yeah, you're right. It's
Yeah.
changing the landscape.
Uh, every time we think a machine is gonna take away our job, whether that was Doom, weaving stuff or steam engine or whatever, like, every time we think that's gonna happen, a few years later, you go, now I've actually got more work to do, but at least some of the dumbest stuff I don't have to do, right? I don't have
Yep.
to go out and knock off a cow to have dinner tonight.
Right.
I'm okay
Yeah.
with that, right?
Yep. Yeah. Offload that to somebody else.
Yeah, or something, yeah. So, we'll put these pieces in place, and then we'll look back at some point, and maybe there's dumb stuff we won't have to do.
Right. Yep.
Fine with it. If an AI can make sense of CSVs,
Right.
hallelujah, I don't wanna do it.
VLOOKUPs and all that. Right.
Yes, exactly.
Oh yeah.
Exactly. "Hey, Excel, would you just, figure that out?" "Yeah, okay, got it, boss."
Yeah. I'll be back with you in 5 minutes.
I'll be back with you, right. I do think we're gonna see, processor wars heat up again, because have you really needed to upgrade the hardware on your desk or in your pocket because the CPU wasn't working hard? Not
Right.
for a while. But as we start stuffing more AI engines in these things, we're gonna have a whole new generation of, "Oh, this thing's too slow.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
ChatGPT in my pocket is too slow. I guess I need a new fill in the blanks."
Yep. It can exactly.
Yeah, yeah. NVIDIA's in a good position. Well, Chris, I knew this would be fascinating, but even more than I thought. Awesome.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah. It was a real pleasure to connect and talk. And I love talking with people who've got a foot in email and a foot in other
Other
spaces,
areas.
because email's really an interesting thread on its own, but it doesn't exist standalone. It's not an island.
No, no, it doesn't. I think, again, for those that are listening, email is it's still relevant. It's still very important. It's still it stood the test of time. And I think that,
Yeah. Well,
again, it's something that is going to continue.
so if someone's listening, you go, "Oh, I want to talk to this guy." How do they get in touch with you?
CyberDataPros.com, contact form there. My email is chris@cyberdatapros.com, or on LinkedIn. If there's anything that you want to chat over LinkedIn as well, happy to do so. So.
That's Chris.